Okay, and I think we're live. And I just wanted to do a really brief rundown of Surah 81, which is called Al Takwir. And it's the translation in my copy of the Quran is the covering up. It's also called the overthrowing. And another phrase that's used to describe this surah is the turning into a sphere. And as we all know, Muhammad was very opposed to the idea of spheres, and he did not believe the Earth was an oblate spheroid. He thought it was flat. Hey, GW. So I'm just going to go through this really briefly, and it begins with Bismillah and continues when the sun is covered, and when the stars darken, and when the mountains are made to pass away. And remember, Muhammad did not know what an eclipse was, what a solar eclipse was. When he saw it for the first time, he thought the apocalypse was about to occur. In 4, it says, and when the camels are left untended, and camels are a recurring theme in the Quran, obviously, because it's set in Arabia. And when the wild animals are made to go forth, and when the seas are set on fire, and when the souls are united, and when the female infant buried alive is asked for what sin she was killed. Now, this is a reference to the fact that the pagan Arab tribes would bury their infants and newborns, particularly if they were girls. If they were female children, they would bury them in the sand until they died. It was kind of similar to what the Romans did, abandoning and also the Spartans. The Spartans are probably the most drastic example of what they did. They would leave their children out to die of exposure, but the Saudis and the Arabs would just bury their girls underneath the sand to let them die. This is used often as a signal of how compassionate Muhammad was compared to the surrounding tribesmen. And it's a bit of a dubious claim, particularly when you look at the historiography of Muhammad himself. But even if you take that as a given, it still doesn't explain why women are treated so shabbily after they're grown within Islam. And you have to look at the context of the Arabian culture in which he was raised. Oh, thanks, Miss Bluebird. Yeah, I probably have more mods per subscriber than any other chat. And when the books are spread, and when the heaven has its covering removed, and when the hell is kindled up, and when the garden is brought nigh, every soul shall then know what it has prepared. But nay, by the stars that run their course and hide themselves, and the night when it departs, and the morning when it brightens, most surely it is the word of an honored messenger, the processor of strength, having an honorable place with the Lord of dominion. And that's a reference to Allah. One to be obeyed and faithful in trust. And here's an interesting transition. In the last 8 verses, he switches very abruptly to defending himself and his prophethood, and he says, "And your companion is not gone mad." And of a truth, he saw himself in the clear horizon, nor of the unseen is he a tenacious concealer, nor is it the word of the cursed shaitan. And this is amazing, because whenever Muhammad starts defending himself, he basically indicts himself. When you look at the history of Muhammad and the tradition surrounding him, he tried to commit suicide multiple times. He tried to throw himself off of a cliff. David Wood has done a ton of videos explaining this. He even did his Muhammad on the Couch series, where he examined Muhammad from a psychological perspective. But yeah, he was mad. He was mad. So the first part is just easily debunked, the idea that he's not insane. And the second part, nor of the unseen is he a tenacious concealer. None of these revelations were attested to by anyone other than Muhammad. And this is one of the reasons, this is one of the main differences between Islam and Mormonism and other false religions that rely on unseen prophecies and encounters with angelic beings, or like the Jehovah's Witnesses, for example, but also Islam. They rely on these nebulous encounters um, with angels that aren't falsifiable, that can't really be tested or demonstrated. Whereas in Christianity, it's based on the resurrection of Christ. He put forward a testable claim. I mean, we can't verify it because we live, of course, 2 millennia almost after Christ's death. But the people around him, hundreds and thousands of people around him, could have verified whether or not he actually rose from the dead. If he hadn't rose from the dead, it's really hard to countenance how the church would have developed. I mean, there are thousands of false prophets, there are thousands of false messiahs, and many that claim that they're going to be resurrected. And as far as I know, all of those died. There were tons of false messiahs in Judaism. Bar Kokhba, during the Judeo-Roman War and uprising, he claimed to be a messiah, and he died. And with his death, the people who believed in his believed in his believed that he was a messiah, that they disappeared. And it's the same thing, that the one of the biggest proofs of the truth claims of Christianity is the fact that the church exists. You had people who despised the idea of being crucified. Romans weren't even crucified. That's how much they execrated that the fact that Romans wouldn't even crucify Romans. That's why Paul was beheaded. And Jews looked at it even more with even more contempt, because it's condemned in Deuteronomy. Whoever hangs on a cross is sin. So the fact that there was a church after Christ's death that persisted is one of the best pieces of evidence to claim. So here, when he says, "I'm not a tenacious concealer," that's false. And in verse 25, where it says, "Nor is it the word of the cursed shaitan," the satanic verses are in the Quran, or they were in the Quran before they were removed, but the preceding verse is still there. That's the thing. Like, you can you can still look to a specific surah and see where the verses were taken out, the verses of the crane, or the satanic verses where Al-Lat, Al-Uzza, the three daughters, possessed Muhammad. You can still trace back to where that was, and this was attested to by Muslims. Even Ibn Taymiyyah, who was and is a figurehead for these Salafi Muslims and jihadists, even he said the satanic verses were authentic. So when he says, "Nor is it the word of the cursed Satan," Muhammad was a literal translator or a go-between for the devil. So all of these are false. The idea that he wasn't insane, the idea that he wasn't some sort of messenger for Satan, the fact that he didn't conceal, all of these are false. So in 26, he continues, "Whither then will you go? It is not but a reminder for the nations." And remember, the fact that Muhammad had an Arabic Quran, this is a keystone to the truth claims of Islam. "For him among you who pleases to go straight, and you do not please except that Allah please, the Lord of the worlds." And that's how it ends. That's the covering up, or Muhammad, the tradition says that this is when the sun is wound round. And the irony here is that Muhammad did not believe in, he believed in a geocentric universe, and he thought the earth was flat. So, like, reading this is kind of amusing. But that is Surah 81. I just wanted to make a really short video. I think there's going to be an apologetics live stream in a couple of minutes. So with that, I will see all of you next time.